Thank you, Madam President. This bill, this amendment has been a very interesting one in terms of the discussion, the angles that were taken, and while I listened to my colleagues, I couldn't help but reflect on a number of things that have happened both in the discussion, before the discussion, and outside of our country. So I think, unlike what transpired earlier today, I think this bill brought about a different level of discourse, which I think I'm very happy to see. I think all parties contributed. Nobody agreed with everything everybody said, but there was a level of maturity and quality in terms of the level of discourse, which I think is where we would like to see this honorable, or the Senate, move in. So I want to thank all our colleagues for stepping up a little bit later. And I think the controlled substance thing may have inspired some of us to exercise some more control. Madam President, there were a few comments that I noted that perhaps were adequately addressed by my colleague senator, so it would make my task a little bit less arduous. The issue of religious use and the involvement of the Rastafarian community as the strongest advocates is correct. And I just want to remind the Senate that we have at all times made sure that they are part of the discussion and the decision making. As far as their involvement on boards and so on, I think Senator Charles has adequately addressed it, so it would have satisfied the curiosity and concern of her colleague, which I think was quite aptly done. Madam President, the issue about what happens with regulated substances that not necessarily would be cannabis, this is why the language of the bill, and again, I'm no lawyer, speaks to legislated substances, because we know that there is more than one substance, quote unquote, that in this country, as we try to work with cannabis, that we will have to regulate. So we are not just being very myopic and looking at cannabis in a vacuum. We would know that our people have experimented with many other substances. Some of them, they have their scientific names, and some of them have their street names. Black joint, I don't know some of them. We have had issues with COPD, and there are other things that are happening in our communities and in our country that means that we must not just be looking at cannabis and even to suggest that we are discriminating, but there are other substances, and I did mention one about what's happening in schools now with these students that we need to pay attention to. So I think there is a reason why the language is specific. Now, it was very interesting with these issues that were raised by the independent senator, and I must say I scratched my head a little bit when I was following his argument. He made reference to a number of sections in the bill that he had issues with, and I followed through with some of his observations with regard to the waiving of licenses that he mentioned on page 7, page 1571. I'm not sure he was saying that is a person having the authority. I'm not sure whether it is a person or from what is in the document that it's the licensing authority that is regulating the licenses. So I think in front of me what I look at there is it's the actual licensing authority and not an individual. So I think that was noted. On page 18, the composition of the board, I think that was raised. I would like to think that can change, because this is new territory that we're entering. This legislation and this process is not something that as a country we have gone in before. So there will always be those types of issues that will be raised. And by the time we get to the bill itself, I think some of the decisions that will be made thereafter will have to be informed by what we do now. And so the concern you raised about the composition of the board, I think he mentioned that there was nobody on the board that could have dealt with a particular issue. I am thinking that that composition can be changed to deal with the other regulated substances, because some of the people on the current board may not have the expertise that are required if other substances have to be regulated. So that will be done according to what substance is being regulated. Yes, there will be need for us to clean up some of what is in the legislation, and we have never been a government that takes the posture that when we come to this parliament with something that needs fixing, that it's absolute and we should not touch it. I think we welcome, especially from learned persons, the Bar Association, and other entities and stakeholders who have insight and who can provide the guidance, that we will take that into consideration. The issue of the Rastafarian community, I think I mentioned that. There's also a question that was raised, I think that was raised by one of the opposition senators, about how are we going to ensure that the small farmers benefit and they are not excluded from the process. It is not by accident that the Ministry of Commerce is also the ministry responsible for cooperatives. And one of the solutions to getting our fishers, farmers, and other small groups of progressive or enterprises to benefit is by organizing them. It is not going to be easy for farmers to benefit from any industry, whether it's cannabis, fishing, farming, CMOS, or any other industry or small business enterprise, if they are on their own, doing their own thing. So it is very important that we ensure that these smaller groups, particularly, as she correctly said, from rural areas who don't have a lot of capacity, who don't have the need, the wherewithal to manage their own finances well, that small cooperatives are put in place to help them strengthen their capacity, and therefore they can use that to be able to access funds, to be able to manage and build on the industry. So I think the Ministry of Commerce, which is also the Ministry of, also the same department where we find cooperatives, is well placed to have a seamless transition, a seamless connection between these two groups. So I'm very hopeful that that can be done. Madam President, I think we can say that we have made quite a few strides. This piece of legislation is, like I said, entering new territory. And we will not shy away and say that we cannot address the issues before us. Advice that was given included looking at what mistakes our neighbors have made, and I agree and I take that well. Because, like was cited in other jurisdictions like Jamaica and even St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there may have been lessons learned because some persons may have moved into this thing not knowing some of the implications of the decisions. But we are not first, we are not last, we are somewhere there. So we have the benefit of the hindsight of some of these colleagues that we talk to, and we have the opportunity to learn and not make the same mistakes. I want to assure the opposition that our Minister for Commerce, when she went to visit these countries where those industries have been explored, did not just go to visit the farms. She also was able to go to the labs. She was also exposed to some of the practices and some of the processes involved in managing the industry. And also the legislation, the legislative framework that is being used, we have to and are able to access. One of the countries that shall remain unnamed was not very willing to share it with us, but one of them was quite willing. So we can look at their legislative framework, we can look at the processes they use, and we can go through it and say, well, you know what, they did this and it was a flop, or this is working well, so we believe that it is more adaptable to our St. Lucia. Don't forget that we are, in terms of our population, our strategic location in the region, we have a lot of opportunity that we can use. So this is one of the reasons why in my earlier presentation, when I presented the bill, I did indicate that we are being very cautious, meticulous, and strategic, because we understand the sensitivity of this, and I think all parties here have agreed that as we proceed, we must proceed with the greatest level of caution. There is no need for us to rush anything. We don't think that we feel under pressure. I think the various stakeholders, especially the Rastafarian community, I think they're very happy with the progress we're making. They've been very patient with us, and you can see by the level of participation. I think there were 2 of their members in the lower house during the sitting. They have given the government and the various stakeholders a lot of support. I have every reason to believe that they understand the need for us to take our time, so that by the time we go into this in full, that we would have made the right decisions. So I want to thank all of them for having been patient and working with us. I want to thank all the stakeholders that I listed that have participated in the process. And before we return to this Senate and this Parliament with the actual cannabis bill, I think what has happened in this House and in the lower house would have told us that there's quite a lot of work yet to be done. And we are open and willing to do that. So I look forward to that happening, and that by the time we come back, whether the Minister of Commerce gives us an update or we are ready with the bill, that we would have been much better off than we are when we started with the process. I thank members again, and Madam President, I look forward to this movement and these amendments and these bills serving the purpose for which they were intended. I thank you.